Welcome to Rucks, Mauls and Oval Balls, and we are back for episode 26 of the fans' favourite podcast, hosted by the fans' favourite podcast hosts. And this week, we got something special, because this week, we're ignoring our mundane banter, we're ignoring our news section, because we've got a guest with us. But first of all, let me start off by, as usually, asking Rory to say hello to the listener.
Hi listeners, how you doing?
Very polite of you, Rory. And for this week, we have Mark. Mark, say hello to the listener and introduce yourself.
Hello everyone. Bit of an unusual one, this debut podcast. I'm Mark Williams, so I suppose to some extent I'm a TikToker now. So I'm on TikTok, a couple of thousand followers, sort of talking into the middle distance about rugby, which has become a bit of a pastime for me. So I'm formerly a rugby player. I played semi-professional rugby, largely amateur rugby. Retired about 7 or 8 years ago through a knee injury and fell into rugby coaching. And as a result of that, I'm now on your podcast. So yeah, it's all good.
Well, you've really reached a pinnacle. That's what I'll say. So when I say we, me and Rory were really keen to get Mark on because we're quite keen to direct this podcast in the direction of not only for the fans, but we also want to shine a light on grassroots, shine a light on rugby that goes on in England, but isn't just Premiership rugby. Rory himself plays down at Westcliff, so he's got a bit of experience of the trials and tribulations, but we're really keen to get some other perspectives. And when I myself have fallen into this world of being on TikTok and all the social media stuff, I recognise someone else who's got the similar ambitions of using that platform to promote the game. So it felt natural to invite you on, Mark.
Thank you a lot for bringing me on. It's not something that I had really in the pipeline. I can't speak for either of you, but it's a funny one, TikTok, isn't it? You sort of upload some videos, a couple of people comment, and then a couple of people start following you, and then it sort of just snowballs into you doing it quite a lot.
And that is why to this day Rory refuses to go on it, as much as I try.
I've been completely shanghaied into rugby social media by David, but I let him take the absolute lead on TikTok. I can't afford to have something else that's going to distract me from what I've got left of my career.
Well, we've still got time to ruin that for you, Rory. But I suppose one of the key things I wanted to ask you, Mark, and really getting into the nitty-gritty straight away for this specific episode of the podcast, is we often on this podcast talk about some of the struggles going on in grassroots, some of the struggles that must be going on. Obviously, you are at the coalface of it. So I'm really keen to know, from your perspective, someone who coaches in multiple different faces of rugby, because you cover a university team, you cover a grassroots team, you do some stuff with Northern England under 18 development stuff, you're covering a lot of angles. I'm guessing you see firsthand some of those struggles that are going on in the lower parts of the game, so I'm just keen to get your viewers on that.
I do. So at the moment I coach in a number of different scenarios. Like I said, I coach a divisional side called North England Under 18s, which is effectively a programme that is picked from players from the 6 northern counties. So the county programme, you get the best players at under 18 from the clubs in the region. A couple of academy boys get released to it if they're not getting sufficient game time. And we make a side that represents North England, and we go and play Midlands, South West England, South East England. Now, there is very little funding for that, and it's sort of maintained through quite a bit of sponsorship. And there used to be an England Counties Under 18s programme, but at the moment it's not running again because of a lack of funding. But that is one of them that it's just about being sustained. But these sort of programmes have brought players through, such as Ollie Cheston came through the Midlands, Dan Kelly came through the Midlands, Tumi Onasanya came through North England a couple of years ago. Roman Zheng, who's just signed for Munster Warriors, has come through North England. There'll be plenty more in the south, but I find that the divisional university club school, to some extent, depending on what school you're at, I don't think it's in as good a place as it was a decade ago from when I was playing. And I can see that from just teams that you go to that I played 8, 9, 10 years ago. I'll use maybe Preston Grasshoppers for an example. You went there 10 years ago and there were 6 teams. There's maybe 4 now. Birkenhead Park, local to me, massive rugby club, used to be 4 teams, full strength. 3 a push now. The club that I'm coaching at now, who are level 7, New Brighton, they are just restarting their 3rd team. They're the 3rd team for years. It's not as strong as it was, and I think part of that is down to COVID. But it's sort of a driving factor for me on TikTok to just try to promote what's good about rugby. And I know that sort of introduction to where I see the game is, that's just reality. I don't think it is where it was. I don't think it's as strong. I don't think the appetite's as high for it. But I don't know. I just love it. So if I talk about it enough, it might generate a bit more positivity based around the reality of where it is, if that makes sense.
I can talk from my experience as well on that. So the club that I play for, Westcliff, are one of the strongest clubs in the area in terms of a youth setup, got a massive youth setup, and have developed a lot of really good players. Players like Jackson Ray and Toby Knight have come through Westcliff, gone on to play Premiership. And when I was growing up, we had comfortably 5 teams. These days, 3 teams on a good weekend, 2 typically. And COVID was definitely a massive part of that. We had a massive drop off in older players who then didn't come back immediately, and actually I'm starting to see a few of them sort of drop back in and start to get excited about it. But I think one of the challenges I've noticed is that step between youth rugby and adult rugby, and getting players so bought into a club that even if it means they go on to only play second and third team for the rest of their career, keeping them invested in a club and loving a club enough to do that. And I think that's one of the key challenges that we find. Players going off to university and then not coming back and playing for the club, or they're not necessarily going to be first team regulars. It's not as an attractive proposition for the younger generation to just mill about playing second and third team rugby on a social basis, really. It doesn't have that same pull as it did maybe 10, 15 years ago.
No, I definitely think that clubs that manage to retain a huge amount of their colts or get players that come back from university, they're almost the exception now rather than the norm. And I'll use the example. So people that follow me on TikTok will know that last year I coached at Lymm, and Lymm were a National 2 North side. They're currently a National 2 West side, which I've got no doubt we'll get onto that. But they are one of the teams that I think do the best job in retaining the players that they've got. And there are circumstances around the club that means it can retain a lot of players in an unpaid capacity. It is quite a wealthy area, but the club does a really, really good job of retaining players, and the buy-in from the volunteer coaches from senior colts down is like nothing that I've seen. It is outstanding, and as a result of that, they are able to churn out 3 teams every weekend, which is predominantly mini and juniors. It's one of those clubs that every time we put the team sheet up, it's just circled with mini and junior. But sadly, that isn't quite the case. And some clubs do go for a different sort of paid model. And I don't think the paid model where you recruit players in, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I'm not against that at all. I think if you're going to go up to the top level, National 1 Championship, any ambition in the Prem, you need to probably do that. But roundly, the point I'm making here is it is the exception. That you could probably list on one hand clubs in your area that manage to retain a huge amount of rugby players, whatever level they play at.
What I'd say with the paid model is, I think you're right in terms of that. Obviously, Championship, probably not one to a certain extent. There's got to be some, particularly with just the travelling distances now, right? That too slightly different now. It's regionalised a little bit more, probably depending on which.
I know you mean.
But I think what you're seeing down at the lowest side, Westcliff currently in what used to be National 3, so it's now London South East Premier or something like that. But you're seeing clubs in lower divisions who are paying over the odds to draw players away from clubs at that level. You think when you get into level 5, 6, 7, and people are offering 100, 200, 300 pound a game, you start thinking, well, this isn't a sustainable model. This isn't a way for a grassroots club to build. And there's got to be some kind of cut-off point where you go, right, there's no payments from here.
And this is something that I feel pretty strongly that if you're going to pay players, you pay everyone. You don't go for that model where some of your players are paid and some aren't. So lads that have been there for 10 years don't get paid, and lads you're trying to recruit do. I don't think that works long term. You're definitely right. I think it is a bit of a double-edged sword, the payment, because I think at this point, to get, and I'll speak broadly from the northwestern leagues because that's where I'm based, I think a lot of teams would struggle to get out of level 6 without paying good money now, because there are teams there that pay quite a lot of money, and I'm not going to name clubs because I don't know exactly financial circumstances that they're in. You just hear say so-and-so's paid this, so-and-so's paid that, but teams that do well at level 6 and level 5 tend to be teams that are able to recruit players from higher divisions because they pay them. And I don't I don't necessarily disrespect the clubs for doing that, because if you've got ambitions to get to National 2, I think you need to pay players, and I'm realistic about that with my own club. There's currently no long-term plan to pay anybody. We've got an unpaid team now, but I think all the teams at level 7, and I can't speak for the teams in our league for this, but I look at the teams at level 7 now, and they've all got teams around them that are paying money, and the teams in our league aren't, which makes recruitment very difficult. So you have to work around that and sell a real reason for a buy-in, rather than, we're going to give you this money. But I do think level 6, level 5, getting to level 4 is exceptionally difficult without cash, unless you are in a position like Lymm, where they have that many million juniors still playing, and also they are very good and very unusual. So they're quite hard to defend. But it definitely is a double-edged sword, that level 5 and 6.
I guess turn it into a more positive note. What that sounds like with a club like Lymm, and they'll be unusual, but they won't be entirely unique in how they do that. Could you just talk to, I guess, the ethos of a club like that in building a mini and youth section, how that just drives numbers all the way through and drives a club culture?
It's difficult. It's difficult for me to talk in huge detail about the mini and junior section, because I was there for a year, and I've moved back to my home club. A large part of the reason I moved back to my home club is because my work circumstances have changed a little bit. So I'm a full-time rugby coach, where I have Saturday morning fixtures, which is obviously is very difficult when you've got Camborne away. Not as difficult when you've got Wigan away. But the Lymm are, in terms of rugby in that area, they're a massive rugby union club. Warrington is nearby, but it's a very rugby league heavy area, and there's a lot of crossover. So you'll see players from Lymm, juniors from Lymm. A lot of them will play at places like Latford Giants, which are quite a big rugby league club in Warrington, and you've got sort of this all-year round rugby league, rugby union junior thing going on. In terms of how they're keeping these players, I couldn't speak more than the feel and the vibe of the club. It's just a nice club. It's just a really nice club. And even before I joined Lymm, whenever I've been there with my county team, when I coached Cheshire 18s, or I've been there with North England, or I've played against them a couple of times previously, I'd always left Lymm thinking, that's a really nice club. And there will be clubs that you go to in your area where you leave and think they're nice. The people there are nice, the bar staff are friendly, it's well looked after.
I know Rory's main question will be, what is a standard post-match tea at Lymm?
The best you'll get. I'm not even the best that you'll get. That is one of the sells. So the food's always outstanding. The first team, whenever they go away, breakfast is laid on for them. You get like a beer allowance and whatnot, and you get told wherever you go, not necessarily by everyone, but you do get told, oh well, you must be paying them to get them all to go to Tynedale, get them all to go to Billingham. It's just not the case. They're just lads that love the club. We had a couple this year of really exciting academy loanees. We had Ralph McEachran, who's the loose head for England. I've honestly, a lad who is 19 or 20 years old, I've never been hit so hard in my life. I scrummaged against him in the warm-up at Sheffield away this year. So we had Sheffield away that weekend, the Storm weekend in December, and he hit me so hard in a warm-up that he took a layer of skin off my back, and it didn't come back for 2 or 3 weeks. So we had him. We had Seb Kelly, who's in that same England team. We had Toby Wilson as well, who's in and around that England team. So you put 3 players like that amongst a load of athletes that love the club, the buy-in is so high, and it also helps that we went on a 11 game, I think it was, winning streak at the start of the season, and that obviously really helps with player buy-in, doesn't it? So
it creates an environment you want to be in, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's always a good vibe when you're winning.
It's funny though, because we said top 6 at the start of the season and won the first game away at Ionians, beat Chester at Chester. We beat Fylde at home, and we sort of just looking around the changing room a bit. Are we decent? We're really good. And then by the 6th or 7th game, it was just a case of going out there. We're going to beat these. And when we had Leeds Tykes came to us round 9, I think it was, and we were roundly written off that Leeds would come and put us in our place. And there was just, they were obviously very good and they've won the league, but there was just that belief that, well, we've done everyone else, we'll do these, and we did. It was an unbelievable event. It was an unbelievable day, and they did knock at their own back when we went there. But it really was special, and the buy-in was just great. It was a great season.
There actually is no feeling like it in rugby than when you're in your own hometown, your grassroots club, your local club, and vibes like that, and you're winning big games. There is genuinely no feeling like it in sport.
That is, I think, what holds people in the game. And I've said this, I think I said this on a TikTok recently, that there is no feeling like when you come off a rugby pitch and everything hurts and you're bleeding and all your mates are sore and you're freezing cold, you're covered in mud, and you just sort of sat there in the changing room and you've just nicked the game, you've just won a game. There is no better feeling than that. But how do you explain that to someone that doesn't play rugby? Because they just look at you and they're like, that sounds awful, why are you doing that? But it is, it's just the best, and it's really hard to replicate when you're not playing the game. As a coach, you don't quite get that same feeling, but it's the next best thing, I think. It's really unusual.
That's probably a good way to go. I mean, as a coach at that level, when you've got boys who are they've got other commitments, they've probably got the full-time jobs, them wives and girlfriends and partners and all the rest of it, and you're getting that buy into them. What's your approach to creating that kind of vibe about the place?
I think as a coach, one of the things that you have got to, it's really tough line. I think you've got to be honest with your players, but you've got to do it in a way that you keep their interest and they keep their buy-in with you. So what I mean by that is, if you selecting a player, obviously it's great for them and they're going to be really happy they're in the team. But if you're dropping a player, or a player isn't selected who thinks they maybe should be in the team, you need to have that conversation with them face to face. You can speak to them over WhatsApp, have that conversation with them face to face, give them clear work-ons, back it with video if you can, tell them exactly what they need to do, training, in games, and ultimately you're there to help them and support them. So tell them that you are there to help them, and if they need any help at all, just message. And a lot of my players do, to be fair, in the season. I'll have players messaging me around midnight about stuff, and I won't always answer it straight away, but they know that whenever they message me, I'll always get back to them. And if you've got a number of coaches and a director of rugby that are willing to do that with players, then that's how you create a really good atmosphere. And with my players at New Brighton now, I've said to them, we start officially on Thursday night. I've outlined to everyone, it's going to be tough. It's probably going to be the hardest pre-season that you've done in a long time. But if you all buy in, we will have a successful season. The year before last, they got promoted. The year before that, they got promoted as well. So have you heard of New Brighton?
I've heard of, not familiar with.
So concisely, it's formerly quite a big National 2 club. It's fallen all the way to bottom and is on its way back up. It's at level 7 at the moment, but the quality of player that we've got at the club, we have got a lot of units. Like, we've got some big pieces of kit in the back, and we've got some really good ball players. So we've got everything that, as a coach, when you walk into a team, you want straight away. It's one of those scenarios where I've walked into a team and I don't actually really need to go and sign that many players, because this is exactly what we need, just a bit of touch up with shape and whatnot. But that, if you give them that level of support and say, this is what I'm going to do, and then stick to it, most importantly, stick to it, that's how you create a culture where everyone is going to hopefully succeed.
How would you describe your coaching style? Is your coaching style more Borthwick, or is it a bit more exciting? Do you like out the back flashy sort of stuff, or are you set piece dominated?
I'm actually both. So
perfect.
I'm probably, this year, to be fair, I'm probably going to coach quite a lot of attack, which I think when you look at me, you probably don't think attack, but frankly, it's a lot of stuff that I'm taking from places like Lymm and just bring it elsewhere, because if it works, it works. And if you can adapt it to another team, then great. I am at the set piece, I am definitely Borthwick. Like,
yeah.
I enjoy the scrum, I enjoy the line out, and probably my point of difference as a coach in terms of technicals is the maul. I'm a real nose for the maul. I've got a series, if you want, on TikTok called Maul Doctor, so I'll take clips of mauls and I'll explain what's happening in there and how teams are defending them well, attacking them well. I think the maul is one of the most undercoached areas of the games. And last season, whenever I was previewing a team, I knew within 2 or 3 lineouts the level of success we were going to have against that team, because some teams were pretty good at the maul and pretty hard to stop. So I think teams like Tyndale, really, really hard work at the maul. Really difficult to get them over their own try line. Sheffield also very good. But some weeks teams look, without being unkind, they look pretty uncoached there because it is quite a niche area of the game, and there is a lot more to it than just shoving your head in and pushing. There's so much around your misdirection. How are you going to potentially entice the other team into competing if they stay down? Where are you going to get? Where are you going to hit them? When and where is your punch pod going to hit? How are you going to set that maul up around the lifting pod? And it's the maul is just, it's something I get really excited about watching, and it's because it's quite niche. I find that as my point of difference.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
you're talking our language.
I can tell you as two old props, but particularly me, the second best feeling behind turning over someone at scrum time is ruining their maul. There's no bigger thrill than breaking apart a maul and absolutely ruining it for them. But there is nothing more demoralising than when you're up against a maul and you can't stop it, and you just get run backwards.
And you know what? That's the best thing about it, because when you go to the maul, and I had a real theory about this last year, and Andy Davis, the head coach at Lymm, the attack coach, former player at Newcastle Falcons, outstanding coach. He is very flashy. Let's play this way. Like, Lymm are pretty loose in how they attack, and they're quite difficult to defend if you don't know what to do with them. And his philosophy is sort of let's get in a 22 play like that. I was like, kick it in the corner and get it up the jumper and maul. And first time, I was always the first opportunity we get, put it in the corner. And that sort of ethos at Lymm changed a little bit. So no, we can actually go in the corner and we can actually get after them, because if that first maul, you hit it and you get straight through them, the other team, you can be in a player when you're in your try area after conceding that first maul, you think that's probably not the last one.
No, a long 80 minutes.
It's a long day. It's a long day.
It's an awful place to be as well as a forwards coach. And thankfully for us, we were pretty clued in there last year, so we didn't have a huge amount of trouble there. But we went to Tyndale away, and it rained hard for an hour before kickoff, and we were on skates at the maul against them. We were absolutely on skates. I think their hooker scored 5. And we still would, but just about. But that was one of those days where I was on the receiving end of it, and I was like, this is actually an awful place to be, because everything plan A didn't work, plan B didn't work, plan C just about worked at the end.
It's soul destroying as well. It is soul destroying, because as a forward, you from that first one, you go, oh Christ, that's not that we've got this slightly wrong, but we can fix it. There's nothing we can do about this. We're absolutely shafted for this whole game.
It's a really hard thing to tweak mid-game, isn't it? If it's not going right, it's hard to make a correction.
Plan B is always they're going to compete, and you'll see where they're going to compete as well. So you've always got them marked down at Plan B as well. But it's a pretty niche area. We're going into the weeds here. While we've got your coaching hat on, I've seen some of your videos where you'll get asked questions. What's your advice to someone who wants to play wing? I'm new to the sport. Or what about a young prop? If you were to be asked a general question by a young player who's just wanting to improve their game, and I often think there's a few things that are across the board, like characteristics or skills that any player could work on. If you were to give any player, regardless of position, advice on 3 areas to work on their game to improve their game, what would be the 3 things you would recommend to someone who's just looking to improve their game? For a young player, skills is the big one that jumps out. So I had a conversation with the parents of a young player at our club he's also gone quite viral on TikTok recently as well.
Is that Rugby Lymm?
It is, yeah. I spoke to her the night, and I said for his development at his age, just skills. So that can be his carry, his tackle. It can be his general pass, short range, long range. It can be his grubber kick, kicking off a tee. You don't know. I would say to most players, you're not nailed down in the position that you're currently playing at 12, 13, 14, and that won't necessarily be where you play when you are an adult. So the more rounded you can get your game, the better. I didn't start playing rugby till I was 16, and I started on the wing, and then I was propping at 17, and then I was propping at National 2 at 20. You look at Ralph, who I mentioned before. I think Ralph, when he signed for Sale Sharp, I think he was playing number 8 at London Irish. Now he's propping for England within 2 years. So you can change your position pretty late, but I would say for younger players, a broad range of skills and in terms of work-ons, doing things that you enjoy at a pace you enjoy, so ultimately that you stay in the game is another thing as well. So don't get too hung up on real detail. If you are a younger teenager, just enjoy the game. Don't work on it at a pace. Just do whatever you need to do to enjoy it and stay in it. And if you have a target as well, I say this to all younger players, if you have a target, usually it is, I want to get into the PDG or whatever it's called. I want to get into the local area's academy. If you don't get into the academy at any point, your rugby journey isn't over. So don't set that as your end goal. Just keep working on your game. There are other paths to potentially go in at best professional, or even potentially playing at a good level semi-professionally and having a career around it. That is absolutely not failure.
Completely agree. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about was, because I see that you coach at Liverpool John Moores University. We have a theory on this podcast that the pipeline from university to professional or semi-professional rugby seems to be getting a bit more focused now, because more and more players are seemingly getting picked up from Superbucks and the university leagues. Is that something you're noticing amongst the players playing university rugby now? Or is it very much still like the day when me and Rory played university rugby, where it was, let's say, more of a social aspect than a career aspirational thing?
I think yes and no. So it's contextual to, firstly, the university that you go to, and secondly, to the level that you play at within the university. So Liverpool John Moores, we don't have a rugby programme as such. We train twice a week at a local rugby club and play fixtures on a Wednesday. It is largely very social. So at university level for us is just the lads having a good time before they leave, frankly. Other universities, however, do have proper rugby programmes, and it is definitely something that players put very high on their list of things they want to have success with at university, and sometimes potentially a little bit too high above their course. I always say to players, especially to the North England lads who are going to go to university, make sure that the course is right for you before you go to the university for the rugby, because I've helped a number of players get into university where they've gone and they put the rugby ahead of the course, and they will eventually drop out if the rugby doesn't work. A lot of the players that I have at North England now, I reference for these Bucks universities, and I'll liaise with their heads of rugby about the players that are coming in. But in terms of rugby, players do want to go and play that level, and I think rightfully that they look at these Super Bucks teams before they go professional, because not all players have been outstanding since they were 16, 17, and they went into the junior academy and they went into the senior academy. You do get late bloomers that go to university and stand out. I suppose Alex Dombrandt's probably one of the biggest examples there. I don't know how heard of he was before he went to Cardiff Met, but he went to Cardiff Met and he showed up. And some universities will scholar these players that are late bloomers or potentially get released by academies at 18 and take them into the Buck Super, and they'll stand out and go professional. So, and on the back of that as well, if they do or don't go professional, they've got a degree behind them to help them with whatever they're going to do outside of rugby. So I can't really speak anything other than positively about the way Buck Super is going, because I think it's just another avenue for players.
Are clubs actively trying to build connections with universities for those senior academy players, or are Bucks teams reaching out to the professional clubs saying, can we get any kind of partnership going, or is it just quite haphazard or organic in terms of how that works?
Yeah, again, that's quite contextual in sort of real detail for everyone on this, but broadly, players that are playing top level at Buck Super are not, I'll say, not allowed to go and play for club because they're on such a programme. And I think to be fair, it's quite healthy that they don't, because if you're in a Buck Super rugby team, you're probably training 3-4 times a week, pool recovery, video sessions, and then playing on a Wednesday. I don't think it will help for you to go and play club rugby as well. You'll just wear out a lot quicker. The lower level universities that aren't playing on rugby programmes or aren't scholared in, and there's no terms in their scholarship, shall we say, those are the universities that clubs will go after. So I know, for example, with my team, Liverpool John Moores, they get a lot of messages from local clubs every year, largely saying the same thing. We are a local rugby club, we're here, we'll give you beers behind the bar, yada, yada, yada. but there tends to already be a link with the club or someone that plays for a club, and they will just sort of go where their mates go. It's not very often that they'll all go somewhere that they don't know. And I don't blame teams for trying to get these university players. But it's the ones that aren't really on a professional programme where lads will play on a Wednesday, they'll have a social, they might train once or twice a week, but then they will go and play for a club as well. So when I was at university 10 years ago, I was at Manchester Met before they had this big rugby programme that they're pushing now, and it was very social. I was playing for a club as well as them because it didn't quite fill the appetite what they had at the time. And fair play, I don't attempt to stop any of my university players playing on a Saturday, even though I know that there's a good chance that they'll get injured playing for their home club or whatever club. A lot of them have played for me at a club near here that I coached a while ago. One or two went to Lymm. One of them is still there at Lymm now. I've signed a couple at New Brighton. A couple more will probably come in September. But again, it's ultimately what makes them happy and what do they want to do. If they want to play more rugby, they can. If any of my students or any students from University of Liverpool, Edgehill or anywhere message me and say, could you give me a contact for a club that I'm not at, I'll give them the contact and introduce them. It's just a better way of retaining young players and giving them the best opportunities.
Completely see that. I think what we like the idea of, as a young lad, and David will remember his name because I'm dreadful with names, who just started playing for the Falcons. They picked him up from, I think, Northumberland, the second row.
Oscar Usher.
That's him, Oscar Usher. And Northumberland's not a university that jumps out at me as being necessarily one of the obvious top rugby universities. I don't know, maybe they may have a strong rugby program that I'm just not aware of. But it feels like there's got to be the potential for clubs that want to shop far and wide, or a bit further and a bit wider than they already are. There's got to be some gems knocking around some of those universities that would jump at the chance to be involved in a professional setup.
There are. It's knowing where to look and having the contacts as well. And I've seen players at university level that is well below book super that you could quite feasibly see that player in an academy in the right environment. I've coached lads at Liverpool John Moores in the past 3 years where if they had a little bit less of a social life and they dropped 10, 15 kgs, they could be in an academy. There's outstanding players, but you play in the reality is there's probably that amount of players that could go professional, but only that many can.
Yeah. They always said that about me if I dropped 10, 15 kgs, to be fair, but I was just wasn't willing to do it.
I wonder if you were going to say that first or I was, Rory, because I had that lined up as well, but I'll let you have that one. So to slightly change tangent a little bit, obviously, again, with your coaching hat on, you're all very much on the front lines to when the RFU changes things up on you, or if there's changes to laws, changes to regulations, changes how things... How do you prepare yourself for when World Rugby or the RFU or whoever comes out with something that fundamentally changes the way you have to look at a game? Recent example being 50-22 rule. That's something new. How do you as a coach adapt and get your guys or girls as ready for those changes as quickly as you can when these changes seem to come thick and fast these days?
The first point, I suppose, is you identify the rules to the players and explain how you can take advantage of it. The 50-22 rule, I think, is one of the best rules that has been brought in to the game. Until, I suppose, this season, I haven't coached a huge amount of attack, so it wouldn't be... And I know you're saying this broadly, it wouldn't be the most obvious example for me, but I suppose it's always educating players on how you can use it and then push it through. When you mentioned that before, the first one that came to mind for me was the tackle height.
Yes, I was going to allude to that one.
Which, that was very difficult, and I don't think that the way it was released helped itself either, because it sort of, I remember quite vaguely now, but it started at one level and then it went lower or higher, and no one really knew where you could tackle, and frankly everyone below level 6 ignored it anyway, and still largely does, which is why you've still got people playing, because otherwise they wouldn't, I assume. But the changes are made. It helps when they're explained a little bit more clearly, I suppose. But you have to adapt to the game as it moves on, and sometimes the game moves on in ways where it makes the game better, in people's opinion, like the 50-22 rule, and sometimes the game will move forward in ways that potentially don't make the game a better spectacle. And there's a lot of, I think nowadays there's a lot more discussion around yellow cards and red cards as a result of that.
I've had a couple of very unjust red cards off the back of that tackle height.
Not off.
Why am I not surprised, Rory, when you're 6'5" and may I say, not the most flexible?
They just are incredibly flexible.
So, I suppose another angle to that was something you alluded to earlier, how there are a few chopping and changing geographical aspects of the National League structure. How do you, as someone working within rugby, motivating players, how do you try and spin some things like that don't necessarily make sense on the face of it? And how would you talk to players about that when those sorts of things are going on? Because as you alluded to earlier, Lymm's local clash against Camborne must be one they're really looking forward to, a real one to get the locals out.
Firstly, I don't think that changes like this, so the split from National 2 North and South to National 2 North, West and East, I don't think it was something that was done deliberately to make the game worse. Everyone that I know who works at the RFU is a good bloke or a nice girl. Everyone that I know works for the RFU with the best intentions, but like any organisation, any person on the planet, they do get stuff. They do get stuff wrong. And when you go back to when the league was changed geographically, I think it was 2022, National 2 West did look different to what it does now. And the majority of teams in the leagues at the time would probably have looked and thought, maybe that's a bit better. National 2 North, frankly, didn't really change. I don't really follow National 2 East that closely. It's a complete other end of the country for me. And National 2 West, give or take, Leicester Lions, who won it anyway. It just ended up being a bit of a Bristol-centric league. But what's happened over time is, with promotions and relegations, it's become quite apparent that National 2, there just aren't enough teams in the West. And as a result of that, there's teams that are getting roped into it from the East Midlands. There's teams that are now getting roped into it from the North. And it's now a case that a team in the North and two teams this year are having to take it in turns. I've heard it described as it's your turn. So Chester went into it the first time. Macclesfield went into it last year, and Macclesfield is further south than Lymm and Chester. And I'm not saying they still should be in National 2 West. They should be in National 2 North, really, where they belong, and they are. But because Macclesfield are in National 2 North, Lymm are now in the West, Chester are now in the West. But the problem is, other than Lymm and Chester, who are 15 minutes away from each other, I think the closest game, or one of the closest games after that, is like Sifton or Hinkley, and that's like 2 hours away at least. And that for a local fixture. And I explained this on TikTok. When Lymm and Chester were in National 2 North, the biggest away they did was Tynedale. And Tynedale is about half an hour west of Newcastle, and it takes about 3.5 hours to get to from Lymm and Chester on a realistic run. 3.5 hours south from where they are now will get them to Cinderford. And Cinderford won't be in the top 5 biggest aways. You've got to go further to go to Hornets, which is Western Super Bear. They've got to go further than that to go to Taunton Titans. They've got to go further than that to get to Exeter Uni. Further than that to get to Redruth. Further than that again to get to Camborne. And you flip it the other way around. Camborne and Redruth have got to go all the way to Lymm, and someone from Redruth's been in touch with me about this, saying that they've struggled for donkey's years with the finances getting around, and I suppose they're in a slightly different situation because you couldn't put them into National 2 North or East, they're just where they are. But I think what gets overlooked with this, and for clarity, England Rugby have said that they're going to have a look at this at the end of the season, and it is positive because they do need to. Staying to a club, you're just going to have to go into National 2 West. What isn't accounted for there is, I'd say, the tripling of the bus costs, and then the rescheduling of work that lads, especially somewhere like Lymm where lads aren't paid, lads are going to have to reschedule work into evenings. They're going to be unable to work on Saturday mornings for the lads that do extra work on Saturday mornings. And you're asking boys to meet at 5, 6 a.m. for some of the biggest away days, and they're going to get back at 1 or 2. And having a tight-knit team that enjoys themselves on the bus is one thing, but that Saturday after Saturday after Saturday through the season, it does become quite a lot. And I suppose it will to Chester as well. Even if boys are picking money up for it, it's still a long time away on a Saturday for a game in a league that you really shouldn't be in.
I can actually, when it changed, so the Westcliff were in National 2 at the time, so we were in Nat 2 South, and then it goes to we were going to Nat 2 East. So suddenly you've gone from having to go to Bristol every other week for Dings, Clifton, Old Reds, and then Barnstaple, Redroof, Taunton. And then next year you go, all right, well, you can go to Leicester a couple of times. You've got to go to Leicester Lions and Hinckley, and that's about as bad as it's going to get. You go, yes, fantastic. But then you look at it now and you go, that doesn't make a lot of sense anymore. It doesn't make much sense at all.
No, and people have asked me on TikTok as well about this, saying, "Oh, what would you do? What's your answer?" My answer is simple. It should go back to the way it was, which was 16 teams of National 2 North and National 2 South. The problem that you'll have now is you'd have to relegate about 10 teams to do that, and you'd have to relegate equally across National 2 North, East and West. And I don't think that they are necessarily leagues of the same strength either. I'm very keen to see how Lymm and Chester get on in this West League next year, because with not a huge amount of detail to go on, to be fair, other than teams that I've seen play in West and East, I think North is probably the strongest of the three leagues and will remain the strongest of the three leagues as long as it is. And the travel is, I think, more manageable when it was 16 teams. I played in National 2 North years ago when I was at Coldy, and the biggest away day that you did outside of Tynedale, and they were in National 1 at the time, I think, anyway, you'd go to Loughborough Students or Leicester Lions, and it was 2.5 hours, 3 hours max. It's not the same as having to go down the M6 and the M5, which add an hour on that anyway. All these teams in the West, it just doesn't work. And I know there's only a handful of clubs that have this situation, but they are still clubs that are going to have to fork out a huge amount of money, and it's not sustainable, because I think if you left clubs in situations like this for a number of years, then you could potentially be looking at the end of some clubs, and it's not fair.
Yeah, the RFU doesn't pay for the coaches. I think they used to pay a fair bit more for travel expenses, but they don't so much now. And we had Guernsey in our league for a number of years, and they used to pay a lot for the flights and the hotel. And then they stopped doing that, and it's like, well, we can struggle to go to Guernsey now, aren't we?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the commitments towards the coaches are, but my understanding from those that I know at Lymm is that it's not covered, because if it was covered, it'd be a lot less of an issue. As for flights, I'm not entirely sure. I've been to Isle of Man a couple of times, played Douglas, but I know that was subsidised. I'm not entirely sure now, to be fair.
Well, I'm very, very mindful of time, Mark. So I think we'll wrap up the interview section for now. But I do feel like we could talk to you for probably another hour or so.
Oh, I could chat grassroots all day. It's like being back down the rugby club again.
Yeah,
Great,
so I'm doing my job of being the fun sponge and keeping us to time. So before we move on to our next area of conversation, Mark, I want to give you an opportunity just to let the people know where to come find you if they want to engage more with you on your TikTok and your platforms. And a nice little 10-15 seconds for you to plug your socials.
So I'm on TikTok. The handle is at MWRUGBYCOACHING. It's largely just a page of me educating players about rugby, helping young players make decisions about rugby, a little bit of analysis of the game, the usual Lions, international, Premiership and whatnot. It's just somewhere where I'm trying to promote the best parts of the game and call out where the game is going wrong, but in a way that people can engage with. So if you are interested in rugby and you want to hear me talking to the middle distance about maul defence, then you know where to find me.
Well,
if I know our listeners, they will.
If our listeners know anything, they'll be on that very quickly. And you mentioned it there, Lions. That's the next big talking point for us, because they had a little fixture this weekend, and I'm very keen to get both of your opinions on this game, because there's been a fair bit of fallout from this game, which has always been quite interesting as someone who is involved in the rugby social media, the difference between different sets of fans' opinions on things. So I'm just keen to get both of your opinions and what you thought of the game. I'll start with you, Rory.
Well, to be honest, I'm not that negative about this one. Partly because I think it's a really good Argentina team. They've taken some serious scalps the last couple of years, and actually, arguably, that is a stronger team than the one they're going to face in Australia. So, to be honest, for that to be the first test and them to lose in that manner, obviously you'd love to win it. You want to win every game. You want the Lions to win everything. But that is a tough first game without all your players and without the time together. So I'm not on the whole, I'm not that negative about how they played. There was some stuff I really liked in it. Some of the attack, they didn't finish it off very well. Some of the finishing for some of those attacks was pretty poor. But the actual intricacies of some of their attack for a first game up, I looked at it and I was like, that's a lot more complex movement in an attacking shape than I've seen from a Lions side that early in a game, really from memory. And actually in a lot of towards that point anyway. So I think there's a lot of things to be actually quite positive about off the back of that game. But there are definitely some issues they're gonna have to address. I mean, the line out was a complete mess. I think if you're going to do sort of winners and losers from this game, both hookers, but if we're being harsh, primarily Cowan-Dickey, but actually both hookers struggled. Dan Sheehan might be one of the biggest winners out of that match. So that was a real negative. I think Marcus probably doesn't come out in the black on that performance, if we're being frank, and his being an option at fullback probably off the back of that game relegates into a midweek experience on this tour, because I don't think he's going to be trusted against the likes of Suoliti to marshal things at the back. Surprisingly, I think Dewey on the left wing had a surprisingly quiet game. Couple of moments here and there, but one decent break where he did miss the opportunity to put Alex Mitchell in. A nice bit of interplay with him and Tommy Freeman at one point as well. But he didn't really make the impact off his wing that you'd want for a player of that size.
No.
And I think he might have to go some to regain a test place after that one. But on the whole, it's not in the plus column because they lost the match and there are some big work-ons, but I'm not actually that negative about it as a performance.
No, nor was I, to be fair. Mark, what did you think of it?
Well, it was, I think, something that a lot of people have lost sight of is that team was the human embodiment of the WhatsApp message that goes out and says who's available Friday. It had loads of the Ireland contingent missing, and Marcus Smith's come under a lot of heat. He doesn't play 15 every week, and you're asking him to play fullback in a team that has been training together for not particularly long against one of the best international teams in the world, and then everyone's surprised that he hasn't had the best game of his career. That's the reality of it. With Marcus Smith playing at 15, I wasn't completely surprised that he wasn't the best player on the pitch, because he's a far better 10, and I've seen him play 10, to be fair. I think the 15 shirt will probably be a battle between Kinghorn and Keenan. Yeah. I think that's probably somewhere that most people have sat since the line selection and will continue to sit all the way through till the first test. I said on social media that I thought that one of the reasons that the Lions lost the game was because there were a lot of players, especially in the forwards, that not necessarily had a poor game, but just had a quiet one. So the way that Ellis Genge played for me, in a way that he plays most weeks in the Premiership, where he's good, he's scrummaged as well, and he's notable, he's aggressive, he carries a lot, he makes a lot of yards, but he stood out an awful lot in that Lions team. And I think one of the forwards that had the highest stats, certainly in terms of tackles, in close to 30-degree heat on a Friday night in Dublin, was Finlay Bealham, who's your tight end and must be the best part of 120 clicks, if not more. I thought a lot of players just, I think, didn't show up would be harsh, but I just don't think they really put their hand up. And there's a lot of variety of opinion on how certain players played. I'll use Jack Morgan for an example. I think Jack Morgan's a quality player. I think he's absolutely earned his place on the Lions tour. He's such an abrasive back rower. He's real hard work. I thought he was fairly quiet when he was on the pitch. But I've looked in my comments after the game and I've seen him described as everything from abysmal to the best player out there. And I think that is sort of where Lions analysis is. Tom Curry, very similarly. I was maybe a little bit generous to Tom Curry when I said that he was probably one of the stronger forwards. Ben Earl I thought was decent, but I just thought there was a lot of quite quiet games. And if you have 9-10 players on the pitch who are being quiet, it's going to be difficult to beat the number 5 ranked team in the world, even if they've got 8 of their first choice players missing.
I had very similar thoughts. I thought all the props, actually, I thought all 4 props played really well. Again, I thought Ellis was outstanding. He was one of the standout players on the pitch. Finlay Bealham, so many involvements. Ty Furlong had his best game when he came on. He played 20 minutes, but it's his best performance for probably 18 months. And Pierre Skoman, I thought was really impactful as well when he came on. I actually thought Tom Curry had a pretty good game when I was watching it back. I thought he actually had quite a lot of involvement. I thought Ben Earl wasn't. He ran it back quite a bit from deep off kicks, but actually I thought in terms of impact, I thought it wasn't his best performance.
This is where it gets contextual, because one of the things that people said about Tom Curry was, he missed the tackle for the game, the try that won the game. Tom Curry flew out the line to try and hit the player and was ahead of the line because of his dog work rate. You have to take that into account, and then you have to watch it back closely. But the tackle that Pollock slipped off was the guy that he went to tackle initially his man. I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to watch it. I'd have to watch it again. But judging a player based on one attribute, one thing that they did on the pitch seems a little bit mad, because I thought Tommy Freeman had a good game, but wasn't there a point in the game where he dropped a pretty rude high ball? Does that mean that he played poorly? Everyone's saying he's one of the best players on the pitch. So I think to say Tom Curry had a poor game just because he wasn't 10 out of 10 like he is every other week, it's a little bit harsh.
I think part of the problem for this round is that we had 3 back rowers where they usually play in a much more well-balanced back row, where they are the out-and-out fetcher, the natural 7, where it was an interesting experiment. It was one I was excited to watch, where it's basically 3 very similar players who, unfortunately, maybe they were just getting each other's way, but they weren't able to win that breakdown battle. And I do wonder if it's just because there wasn't that balance. There wasn't that big ball-carrying lump that you usually have in the 8 shirt. You don't have that tall, rangy other line-out option in the 6 shirt. It was 3 natural 7s, in my opinion, because I know Ben Earl is fundamentally used as an 8 by England. I still consider him as a 7 personally. So I think that might have been part of the reason why all 3 of them had okay games, but not spectacular games, because I suspect they were probably getting each other's way.
I also think it's half the reason the line-out faltered as well, because as soon as that team got named again, it's who was available around injury and finals and whatnot. But as a forwards coach, there's not a huge amount of height and line-out operators in there. Ben Earl is largely in the midfield. Jack Morgan probably better used in the midfield. Tom Curry does jump at the tail for Earl Sharks quite a bit, but he tends to come in on the 7-man. It's bold to go that fetcher heavy in the back row, and I think part of the reason the line-out faltered was because of that. But again, it's read into it as much as you want. The test team is probably not going to look like that. But I did think players, I did look at it and think, I'm not unhappy with the line selection, but I did look at it and think, was this a situation where Farrell might look at players like Jamie Ritchie and think, without Caelan Doris as well, maybe the lineup would have operated a little better with someone like him in that back row if they'd have brought him.
I wonder if it's going to maybe force his hand on putting someone like Byrne or Chesham to 6 when they link up. Because I think you're right. It's a short back row, and it was probably why I was a bit surprised to not see, with Caelan Doris being out, why he didn't pick someone like, well, I'd say one of the top performers at 8 would have been someone like Tom Willis, who was obviously that kind of big unit you can use as maybe a bit of a line-up jumper, or Aaron Wainwright, even someone just that bit taller.
I wonder, with Caelan Doris roundly predicted to be the Lions captain, I wonder whether a lot of the selections were made with him in mind at being at number 8 and thinking, right, well, we've got that third real jumper there. We can probably go a touch shorter at 6'7", and then when he got it, that changed things a little bit, because there isn't really a lot of haters that is not Doris and Conan, although he jumps at the front for Leinster. He's not the line out entirely. I'd say he's probably a step down at the line out from Doris with respect to him. Outstanding player on the park, but he's not Doris as a line out. I just wonder whether that Doris injury, maybe the Lions coaches quickly realised how much they cashed in on Doris starting the tests. I don't know. I'm just a guy with a TikTok. I don't know.
Maybe they don't fancy the Australia lineup. Obviously, Australia got a couple of big locks, but actually, if you think about their back row, is there an outstanding line-out jumper in the back row? Valentini's can jump, but maybe they think maybe we don't need it. Maybe we don't need 3 jumpers necessarily.
Coaching hat on, I would probably go the other way with that and put some real jumpers in and really take advantage of it and steal a ton of their ball. But I understand the point that you're making for sure.
So another couple of players actually close to my heart, who I've been defending very, very much so on my social media, I've had a lot of people complaining about Alex Mitchell and Finn Smith. I personally thought that, again, contextually, games.
I thought Finn Smith had a good game, actually. Very, very brave covering the ball at the back. I don't know anyone who could suggest that Finn Smith had a bad game off the back of that performance. I think Alex Mitchell was actually fine, but where I've got Alex Mitchell down in the potential losers column for this game, not because he played badly, but actually just when Tomos came on, sped the game up so well. And I think that's where Tomos put the marker down and going, maybe I'm the second option behind JGP, who, let's be realistic, is almost certainly going to start in the test.
Well, rumours are that he may not be fit enough.
There's always rumours, but let's see first. But I think Alex Mitchell looked worse by comparison against Thomas Williams, but actually was broadly had a decent game in that first half.
I think Mitchell was one of those players. When I talk about the quiet games, he was one of them, and I would completely agree with Williams. Came off the bench and just brought so much more zip to the game. I didn't think Smith was that bad. I really didn't think Finn Smith was that bad, but I don't know. There's plenty more time.
Yeah,
he showed genuine moments of bravery, sweeping up the ball right into contact. He got clattered a few times covering the ball in the backfield. I thought he was a good. I think where he suffered was just that lack of continuity in the back line as a whole. I think when he could get Marcus and Tommy Freeman into the attack, it linked up quite well. I think he probably struggled a little bit to get both Bundyaki and Tuipulotu into the attack enough. When he did, they looked good, but I think there was just a disconnect between 10 and the centres, and that's maybe where people are picking up on it.
Did the centre partnership work?
I think it can. I don't know whether they... I think I'd still be tempted, if Hugh Jones is fit, I'd be tempted to draft him back in and play him with Tuipulotu, but I still love Bundyaki, so I'm not going to complain if they keep them both in. I'm
going to say no, but that is because not that I don't think they're good players. I just think they are too similar, and I also think that Sione Tuipulotu is an outstanding 12. He's a world class 12. He's not the 13, and it's like asking a fighter to play loose at an international level. It's similar, but it's not quite the same. Again, I think that was selected out of necessity more than anything. I don't think it will be a project that the Lions will go with. I don't think either of them were poor. I just don't see that being the partnership for the first test. I think one of them will start 12 and then Jones or Ringrose will be a 13 because the balance is just better.
I think they'll just pick one of the partnerships. Did you see Joe Schmidt throwing out the little barb about them being the Southern Hemisphere centres? It's a bit ironic, Joe Schmidt saying that when he's the one who brought Bundyaki in the first place. But that was an interesting barb from him there. We could go through the Australia squad. We could go through the Australia squad and see how many non-Australian born players are in there, but I wouldn't sink that low.
Yes, you would. So on the game itself, it's probably also worth pointing out from an Argentina perspective, and I suppose from Mark, from your coaching perspective, and a real bugbear of mine is the caterpillar ruck, box kick, chase, aerial game that I know is a really important part of the game. I find it incredibly boring, but is it such an incredible weapon to have up your sleeve, as Argentina showed, because they absolutely dominated that aerial battle, I felt.
It's horses for courses, isn't it? So I agree that it's boring, but a number of people will say Maul defence is boring, and
I'd disagree.
I make a ton of content on it. So I think if you're going into a game where you can compete in the air and you've got a chase that is set up and can envelop a winger, especially from the caterpillar ruck and a box kick, if it's going to make your territory and it's going to nullify a threat, especially if you're away from home with the best part of 60,000 people or so in a stadium cheering against you, I don't see why you wouldn't weaponise it. It's part of the game. It's one for the purists, but it's a weapon that can be used, and it was a weapon that was used and worked.
See, this is the thing. Well, I'm going to split the difference between both of you, because I actually don't mind the kicking game, but in those situations where you've got a purposeful kicking game, and I thought Argentina used theirs so well, and if you've got players like Isco, this is one of the things actually I think we're doing probably is going to have more of a question mark next to his name in the test team, because he got absolutely dominated by Isco. I think it was for Argentina's first try in particular, where they regather it on top of it. And if you're going to use it, someone like Iskro, regather the ball and then score a fantastic try, well, then the kicking game works and it's part of an entertaining game, isn't it? So brilliant. And they've got Iskro, Mendy, Carreras, Gonzalez, Matera, who are all chasing down kicks and regathering them. I think fair play to them for doing that. And actually, the fact that they scored great tries off the back of it sort of justifies it more than just as a means to an end, as a means to an entertaining game.
There's always an exception to the rule, Rory.
Well, it just shows that if you're going to use it purposefully. I think you can get frustrated when there's a kicking game that is ineffective and is just giving away ball. But I don't know if we're going to talk much about the England game. There were some groans about some of George Ford's kicks, but some of George Ford's kicks into the corners, it was 150-22. They were fantastic. They were brilliant tactical kicks that won England field position and possession at occasions. But it's just having a kicking strategy that actually has an end point. That's the key thing.
So I will accept that there is definitely a place in rugby for tactical kicking and well executed tactical kicking. It's just, and I'm not labelling this Argentina, because I do agree it was obviously very effective and it did lead to exciting rugby. I've just been very, very ground down by some very boring rugby taking place in the Premiership, where there's been far too many box kicks that have been aimless and pointless. So maybe I'm just a bit cynical now.
Well, let's not blame kicking for that. Let's blame Saracens and Exeter
And Bath.
Just because.
Saracens are good at it, though.
Well, that's the thing. They're good at it. So it's frustrating. It's frustrating when they're good at it. So, again, were there any other particular moments? I have a feeling I might know a moment that Mark might pull out, a particular try from a maul that kind of stand out. I know Luke Cowan-Dickey's try from the maul was one that you've picked apart a bit in your series already. But are there moments in this game that are real talking points that are worth pulling out?
Well, when the maul actually got going, it was pretty effective. The one that I pulled out and done a video on so far was the one where he failed to ground it at the start, which was a bit of a funny one because Argentina effectively just enveloped the maul and went too wide on both sides and split their own maul in half. The try that he actually scored, I've got a clip of it. I think that's possibly next in the series. Was just a case of coming down and putting the punch through the correct player. So they went, I think, through the back lifter, who Argentina didn't have as many bodies around, and as you're being in a maul, as soon as you get on the front foot off that punch when they initially come down, if you time it well, it's just so hard to stop. And it was one of those, within half a second of the jumper's feet hitting the ground, you knew where it was going to end up, and it did. I
think for me, to be perfectly frank, the big moment for me was that Argentina try at the end of the first half. Just that counter attack was just so devastating. And it reminded me of why I like Argentinian rugby so much. It's my favourite international team I've ever watched was the 2007 Argentinian World Cup team with Dean Hernandez, Contapone, those kind of players. And you watch it when they're in full flow like that, they are just fabulous to watch. And I watch and I think maybe I want to watch them more than I want to watch other teams at the moment. And I thought that was the best moment again. And that was probably something that if you take the game as a whole, as I think the Lions had some good intricate attacking shape at times, but there was a lack of decisiveness in finishing off opportunities. There were some bad offloads at bad times from Tommy Freeman through a couple, doing through one. There were a few bad offloads thrown in there. Compare that to the offloading from the Argentines for that try in particular. You got to, well, if the Lions want to actually progress and play this attacking brand of rugby this summer, which, to be fair, from an intent point of view, that looked like what they were trying to do. They need to be a lot more decisive in the shapes that they're playing and finishing off opportunities and being ruthless. Because Argentina showed how effective that is when you just make good decisions at good times of when to go. And I thought they came out on top because they were ruthless with all the gilt-edged opportunities they've got, and that was the major difference between the two. So I think you just have to take your hat off to them. Like Albano's try at the end of the first half was just emblematic of that for me.
So I think the only one I'm going to draw out, and it's because I simply can't go 30 minutes without saying Henry Pollock's name, but that moment where he was brought on, that passion that he had, that moment where he was the one that was trying to G up the other players coming. He's the one shouting, "Let's go."
What about got stripped for the ball to lose the game at the end? What did you think of that?
Well, I feel like considering the number of other back rowers on that pitch, I think he still had more turnovers, one, compared to his competitors. He made one important turnover earlier on, so for me, that is now negligible, net zero issues. Yes, he probably was at fault for that missed tackle as well, but like I said, I can't go 30 minutes talking about a game Henry Pollock's in and not mention his name, because I've been championing him for so long. I can't ignore him now he's at the Lions. But obviously, Lions are playing Western Force this coming weekend. What changes have to be made for that game?
Lineouts with first points. I think there'll probably be wholesale changes with lads coming into the squad. Won't there? It'll be probably quite an Ireland-heavy team, not necessarily because players need to be dropped as such, but I think a lot of the players, I don't think this will be news to anyone, but I think a lot of the players that haven't played or been in the squad will just be in the squad, so they get some game time. So I think we'll be looking at a very different Lions team. But it's I don't know, does it become a must-win? Because we lost to Argentina and the fifth best team in the world, but would we be getting into compounding territory if we went to Force and lost? I don't know how likely that is, but does the result matter, do you reckon?
Yeah, I think it does, because I think Lions tours, successful Lions tours, are built on momentum. So I mean, the last Lions tour that we won after losing the first game was 1971, but the difference is in that team you had Gareth Edwards and Barry John and people like that, and it's a famous tour for a reason. I think if you start to lose that positivity this early in the tour, I think it can become a drain very quickly, even with as good a motivator as Andy Farrell in the camp. I think you're gonna struggle to get out of that negative space unless you start winning games. My gut feel is that there will be wholesale changes, but I think Farrell will play it a bit safer in the instances where he can put out an established partnership in, say, the centres or at the halfback. If he can put out an established partnership there to just knit things together a bit more, I think he'll try and be as risk averse with the strategy whilst giving the lads who've come into the team as much of an opportunity as possible. I think he's going to try and strike that balance as much as he can.
It's a tricky one, because I've got distinct memories of some Lions tour warm-up games where there's been a few in a row that have been underwhelming, and there's usually a narrative that gets built around it saying, how is this Lions test team going to be ready for the full tests? Generally, I think Lions teams do switch it on for tests regardless of their warm-up games. So I don't think the results are ultimately important. For me, it'll be performance-wise. But I do agree that I think if they lose to Western Force after losing to Argentina, it's not a very positive space to be in going forwards.
People only remember the test results. No one cares about who won the midweek games, but that's not the bit of it, is it? It's the noise around the team, and it's the feel in the camp. And unless you start getting those wins, that can get dark quickly. Yeah.
So, do we think, now I've got you here, Mark, so I'm going to put you on the spot. Do the Lions win the Australia Test Series?
You'd hope so. You'd hope so. I think the team that's gone out there is strong enough, isn't it? I don't watch a huge amount of Australia or Australian rugby. I don't really follow Super Rugby now. It's split up as such. But I looking at that side, especially with how strong Ireland are, how strong the Scottish backs in particular are, which no disrespect to their forwards, they're also very good, but the Scottish backs at international level, how well England are going, and then Wales obviously very poor, but you've got two pretty good players in there. You couldn't create a stronger squad really to go out there, and I don't look at this Lions team and think it's any worse than the one that went 8 years ago. It is the best of the best, and since it was selected, I look at it and think that team should be good enough to beat Australia 2-1, if not 3-0. I don't know if there's a level of arrogance in thinking that, but you would think with 3 of the 4 nations being so strong, they should be able to go to Australia and turn them over. It's a little bit different if it's South Africa, New Zealand, I suppose, but yeah, I would expect the Lions to win this.
I've got to agree. I mean, Australian rugby's on the upturn. I think from what I've seen and read, there's a lot of really good things happening now down there, and I think they have turned a corner. But I just think this squad's really strong. Result aside, on Friday, I saw enough green shoots in that performance against a really good Argentina side for me to think this is a strong enough squad to go down to Australia and get some really positive results.
Yeah, well, I immediately think scrum-wise, the fact that Lions were all over Argentina in the scrum, and I think Argentina's scrum is significantly better than Australia's scrum, immediately there's a weapon there that I think we could already build around.
I agree. I think you look at someone like some of the players who are in maybe their last Lions tour opportunity, but are at the peak of it. Someone like Ellis Genge, there's a reasonable chance this would be his only opportunity to be a starting Lion and make a real impact on tour. And when players of that calibre and that level, Tauper, Maratoje, get the bit between their teeth and try and carry a team, you just got to think there's enough there for them to roll over Australia. I just think they will.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think they should. And I do agree that if this was a tour of South Africa, harder one to be so confident on.
Yeah.
Mark, did you watch the England game versus France?
Well, I watched what I could of it. It took, yeah. I think anyone that tried to watch the game through Rugby Pass will know this, but it took about 20 minutes to get onto the stream. I was kicked out of the stream 3 times in the first half, and then eventually England Rugby put it on their YouTube. Well, I don't know when they put it on their YouTube, but by the time I found out it was on there, the link had sorted itself out. I did watch it. Touch underwhelming, the game. I thought, again, when the main talking points of the game are cards, it's potentially reflective of the game. In terms of performances, your standout player up front for me was Tom Willis. I mean, he just cements the fact that he is England's 8, give or take how you want to play with Ben Earl. Like you said, there's a case of Ben Earl playing at 7, but 7 is also stacked. Tom Willis is your more traditional 8, I suppose. He's a big lump. He just runs through you, doesn't he? There's one way with him. He's got a lot of skill and used to feet and whatnot, but he is just there to go through you, and he did it a number of times. But yeah, it wasn't. I didn't think it was super exciting, but there was enough there, considering that there was a Lions tour players coming through, like Joe Carpenter, like very good, Tom Roebuck, very good. These are players that are getting their shout for the first time, or some players are getting shouts because players are away with the Lions. It's promising, but yeah, I didn't think it was the best spectacle. I don't know if that's a little unfair.
I think the RFU, and we've probably bashed them a bit too much at points in the past, but I thought this game was badly promoted. It was badly attended. I mean, they could barely fill up the lower stand. It wasn't even showing as a fixture on BBC Sport until the day of the game. It wasn't even showing up as the fixtures, like for an England game. Really, you can't promote that.
I literally didn't know it was on until the Thursday, and I am top one rugby nose as you'll come across. Do you know what I mean? Literally run a TikTok on it. I had no idea until the Thursday. I was like, England 15 v France 15.
Yeah, I don't know who's doing their PR at the moment, but they should be immediately chopped using just rubbish. Rugby Pass TV. The less said about that thing, the better.
Yeah, that wasn't a shining light, was it?
Completely useless. And then the game itself was, it was average at best from both sides. And it was an England beat. I mean, to be fair to England, I saw someone put out a 15 or a 23 of players that were missing from that squad, and the first 15 you could legitimately say would have been a potential England starting 15 and still have 2 Lions on the bench. So it's not the strongest England squad, but it also, you were playing a France C or D team, and the game kind of played out that way. It was just poor generally. I mean, some good stand-up performance. Tom Willis, I thought, had a really good game. Right to bring him up. Tom Roebuck had a good game. Seb Atkinson had a good game, and Don Brandt probably had his strongest game when he came on for some time, actually carrying with some real intent, which was nice to see. But players like Guy Pepper was really quiet, didn't really get into the game at all. Alex Cole's got his try, but actually generally some bad distribution off the line out, some mistakes around the pitch. Feo Boso obviously tried to guillotine a Frenchman, so less said about that the better. Yeah, and then Trevor Davison, I would have struggled when he came on, probably should have been carded for collapsing them all, and had a penalty try chalked against him. So I mean, it's not great. The less said about the game, the better, really, because it just wasn't, which is not a great ethos of podcasting.
Yeah. I suppose one thing to talk about. Thoughts on the 20-minute red card, Mark? I think we've talked about it before on the podcast, but always interested to get other people's views on what are generally seen as controversial topics.
I absolutely hate it. So I've been getting quite clear on social media about this. I don't like it because a red card is a red card. If you can dish the red card, you go off the pitch. If you ask a 5-year-old what red means, they'll say stop. It literally means stop playing. So dishing out a red card that is only valid for 20 minutes, firstly, I think it undermines what red cards are for.
Yeah.
And secondly, and I think this is the biggest problem, is that it becomes too easy to upgrade a yellow to a red. And I think that was shown really clearly with the Cameron Woki card, which I'm struggling really to see how it was even a yellow. I understand why Holly Davidson gave it as a yellow. I think she didn't have a poor game, to be honest. I know a couple of people have said she did. I don't think she refed the game poorly. I, in fact, think that she did everything she could to keep Faye Webosa on the pitch. I thought she did everything she could to try and keep that as a yellow, and I understand why it was upgraded to a red. It was a bit of a hairline tackle, but is contextually a mistimed tackle from Faye Webosa in a friendly game enough to miss that much of a tour on the back of it. I think if you'd have given a yellow and had him off for 10 minutes, I'd have been happy with that. It probably would have been one of the top end yellows, but I think the 20-minute red card, it was always getting given. Cameron Woki, would that be upgraded to a red? No. I don't think so. He's just gone into a ruck. And wasn't there something about him, he's led into the ruck with his shoulder, which was one of the comments that I've heard that branded round. Like,
what body part you're supposed to live with?
How do you clear a ruck out? Like, this is, even if I had 2 functioning knees, I don't think I'd actually go back to playing because I would clear a pile of one's head off. I think there's got to be a level of understanding that if you fly into a ruck and someone has their head down or they've dropped in for a turnover, especially, this isn't necessarily the case with Cameron Woki's one, but if you fly into a ruck, there is a good chance you're going to catch someone on the side of the head, across the face. Like, a ruck is literally a pile of bodies. So if we're going to start yellow cards and a 20-minute red in players that are flying into a ruck and catching players in dangerous positions, like, rugby is a dangerous game. I just think we're on a bit of a hide into nothing. It's almost like a race to the bottom to card as many players as possible. I don't know if I'm being a touch dramatic with that, but it certainly felt like, and I don't think, with respect to the TMO, I don't think he really helped on Saturday. It just became a bit of a let's check this. Like, I think it's getting needless, and we're almost losing the identity a little bit of what rugby is. Like, it's a dangerous game. There's going to be some bad clear-outs. There's going to be some bad tackles. They're not necessarily malicious, certainly not at the top level of the game. Sometimes you've just got to, at most, give a yellow card or play on pen only. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of parts to it. I don't think Cameron Woki and Faye Webosa should have received the same in-game punishment for those two.
No,
those 2 hacks. They were completely different. Woki's is probably a penalty, but also as part of that, Jamie George is lying on the ball on the wrong side. You've got to get rid of him somehow. All right, he's caught his head, but Jamie George has got a massive fucking head. So you've got a much higher percentage of hitting that. Faye Webosa's, I think, probably is a red card. To be honest, even in a friendly, because it is an atrocious bit of tackling. It's not malicious, he was obviously just desperate to get involved in the game after being out for so long. But it's a bad tackle, and it probably is a red card. And if you're going to give a red card, it's got to be a red card. I don't think ending up in a situation where Rafi Quirk has to cover him actually does not a half bad job, to be fair to him, in defence at least. But it doesn't feel like that's a suitable sanction in a game. And now, you've ended up with this weird game that's come away with it. No one's really happy with anything that's happened in that game. It's kind of ruined the whole experience from start to finish. It's just a bad game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely didn't come away from it thinking it was a good use of time watching it.
Well, this podcast has a running feature, Mark. I don't know if you're aware. It's the Democratic People's Republic of the Front Row, where we highlight particular moments from front row members of the rugby community. And I I think it would be in keeping if we didn't talk about Joe Hayes' break.
100% goes into DPRF folklore for that break. I mean, Guy Pepper, God love him for giving that offload when he really shouldn't have, and he should have tried to run it in himself because he was already off the ground. Joe Hayes was magnificent trying to run that in, and he did outrun. I think it was Guillard he outran, and he got caught by the 7. I'm not sure who the 7 was off the top of my head, but only got caught by a 7 in the end. He was very, very close. And Joe Hayes, if you remember, David, was the genesis of the DPRF.
He was.
This pod, questioning whether he was the right physical shape for an international tight head.
Or how we've developed.
He proves me wrong every time I see him now.
He's class, Joe Hayes, isn't he? He was the other player up front I thought had a really strong game. I mean, the level of disrespect from the front 7 to actually tackle a man that will never be in that situation again in his life. That is probably the one scenario where I would give a 20-minute red card just for tackling a tight head who's on a 40-metre break. That sort of disrespect doesn't belong in the game.
No, I completely agree.
I agree. Yeah, you can't kill dreams in that way. When props can fly.
No, he's ruined a lad's day there.
Yeah, absolutely killed the dream. And I think the other moment I also want to put out for this game, because there's not a great deal worth talking about this game, but also, was Seb Atkinson not aware where the try line was?
I realise I'm a biased Gloucester fan, and I want to give Seb Atkinson as much rope as possible on this. I think he was worried about double movement.
Right.
That's what I think it was, because he got tackled, and I think he thought, if I try and place this from here, I might get called for double movement. But I also think he's also an incredibly generous and friendly person who just wanted to give one of his mates an opportunity to score a try, and we should all applaud him for that, and actually maybe stop criticising Seb Atkinson.
Yeah, I did think when he went down that it was a little unusual that he presented it back, but I've frankly never been in a situation in my life where I've been close enough to the try line to understand that level of decision making. So if he wants to present it back, he can. I also think really from there, England was so on the front foot that they had to score that.
Yeah, thankfully a try was scored. I think if a try wasn't scored after that, I think a little bit more stick may have been heading his way. Okay, so again, 2 games we've spoken about this week. Both those games, results not ended how we would have anticipated, with Argentina beating Lions, a France 15 beating an England 15. On a similar topic, so we said with Lions playing Western Force, how do we see England faring against that Argentina team?
I like the England squad they've picked. I think it's actually a really exciting squad with some exciting players, but I think you've got to be realistic about how good that Argentina side is at the moment. And if England are going to get any results in Argentina, they're going to need George Ford, Jamie George, and Tom Willis to have absolute stormers as the senior players there. Because on the basis of that performance on Saturday alone, and that's a very limited scope, they are going to struggle to break down Argentina.
And in Argentina.
In Argentina. It's going to be warm.
It's going to be warm.
I think the worst case scenario that England will find themselves in if they lose heavily here is they will at least see who is capable. And given that is the team that's going with so many missing for the Lions, I think it's potentially easier to stand out in that team. So I don't think long term it's necessarily going to be a bad thing. I think going out and whacking one of the smaller nations 3-0, you don't really learn anything.
Yeah.
I think you will probably find out who is cut out for this level. And like any squad announcement, there's a lot of chat around players that have missed out, who shouldn't be in there. It's always the case. But playing Argentina away on a summer tour, we will find out who is ready for international rugby. And some players will be making that step up into the squad alongside those players from the Lions that will come back and play for England. So long term, it will be a positive. But at the end of some of these games, it may not be. I don't know.
Yeah,
I think
it's a good point.
I think Argentina are going to win this one, probably 2-0 is my gut feel. But as long as the Gloucester boys go well, I don't care. I do think 1 or 2 players will come away from this tour with real credit in the bank. But I can see, just on the back of that performance, and I won't start naming players here and now, but I can think of 2 or 3 who will. This will be probably their last chance in the England squad.
So yeah, this may have a serious reorder and rejig of what that England depth chart looks like. So it'll be interesting to see who the risers are and who the fallers are. But all that to look forward to. And coming up very, very soon, we've also got the Under-20s World Cup, which we'll talk about in a future episode of the podcast. Ralph McEachran, who you mentioned earlier, Mark, playing for England in the Under-20 World Cup. Got a keen eye on that England front row, because I love watching that Under-20 side, because the England pack is monstrous. But I think for this week, time has flown. I've very much enjoyed having you join us this week, Mark. It's been really good to get that third perspective rather than just be mine and Rory's little echo chamber. So very much enjoyed having you on with us. I just want to say thank you for coming on. Thank you for indulging us and joining in with our chat and adding your thoughts to it as well. Just want to say thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Really enjoyed being on it. Actually, it was time does fly, doesn't it?
But, it does.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really,
and we'll have you back on, I'm sure. Especially if anything comes up where we need a coach's perspective, we know who to call now. You can be the unofficial Rucks Balls Over Balls coaching consultant. And as we always end our podcast, I always ask Rory for an on-the-spot final thought that he always takes about 10 seconds to think of. So before I play the closing jingle, Rory, do you have a final thought?
Go on, Lions.
Wow. That even took longer than it used to. But that has been episode 26 of the Rucks Balls and Oval Balls podcast, joined, as ever, by myself, Dave, Rory, and Mark. I hope you've enjoyed listening, and come back next week.